Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. And every Monday morning, I'm joined by Sam Osterhout, and we go over the weekend's headlines and what's going to be ahead this week on Lincoln Square. So, starting out today, let's see, Sam, do you want to start? Should we start with West Point?
Yeah, let's start with West Point.
Okay. So we got news that Tom Hanks was going to be honored by West Point, and this seems relatively uncontroversial. I mean, he's kind of like America's dad. But given the fact that he is, a Hollywood liberal, I guess this was deemed to not be acceptable to the new regime. And so West Point has pulled out of honoring Tom Hanks. And this is yet another example of an institution obeying in advance.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I think there's this mix of ridiculousness
Mm-hmm.
and seriousness. Seeing ICE agents kidnap people in the streets is terrifying.
Right.
And this, canceling America's dad at West Point it seems silly and frivolous, but it's actually I think it's as important as some of the other stories that are happening because it's a bellwether. This is the canary in the coal mine. If schools aren't allowed to invite whomever they want, and the protests, look, I guess, students have always protested speakers.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the student body protesting the speaker. This is the president of the United States. This is a powerful man wielding his power to control and coerce. What was your first take when you read that story?
So, one of the hallmarks of autocracy is that there is a ridiculous, bent to everything. Like we saw with Trump and his Shypocalypse Now truth about invading Chicago. It's meant to, have this sort of pseudo ironic cast to, really dangerous things.
Mm-hmm.
So you can always have this plausible, deniability about like, oh no, it's not that bad. You liberals, you're always, overreacting to everything. Haha, we owned you again.
Right.
But, what's dangerous about this is that, this doesn't appear to be a case of like, the Pentagon explicitly leaned on West Point or anything. They just
Right.
decided, hey, this will displease dear leader. So let's not honor the guy who, really helped us get the World War II memorial that is on the National Mall, who has done so many, historical movies and documentaries, to do, especially with World War II, but just the military in general. And, I the fact that you're picking on a guy like Tom Hanks, he's not like, some radical or anything, he's
Right.
sure, he's donated to Democrats like a lot of,
Sure.
Hollywood types have, but
That's
like,
his absolute right.
right. In America, money, money is free speech. The Supreme Court has established that.
Right. Right.
And so, but he's not out there calling for a socialist revolution or anything. Um,
No.
One thing that I have always remembered about Tom Hanks is after Trump was elected, for his first term in 2016, and he was on Saturday Night Live, and he gave a speech like, "Hey, it's all gonna be okay. I know this guy seems crazy, and we're all scared, but like, don't worry about it. We're good." And like, my reaction at the time was like, sure, Mr. Multimillionaire, of course you're going to be okay. I don't know about the rest of us. And that was the first term. Now
Yeah.
we have, as you pointed out, ICE agents, they're just taking people off the streets. We have Trump invading, American cities like LA, Washington, D.C., soon to be Chicago. He's really taken the, autocracy up quite a bit. And so, if a guy like that is considered to be verboten in the new Trump era, I mean, who isn't?
Well, and I think I'm going to have a hard time articulating this, but I talk a lot about culture, about the cultural shifts that are happening. There's policy shifts that the pendulum goes back and it goes forth, and but I think the deep-seated cultural problems or cultural changes that happen are more persistent because we are cultural creatures. We're not creatures of policy,
Right.
right? We enculturate our children as they grow up, and that's how you become a human being in this society, right? And so if you change the culture, you're changing the people. You're changing who we are, and this culture has been moving in this direction for a long time, but is becoming dedicated to not to truth, not to dialogue, not to connection, not to celebration, not to hope. It's being directed at dominance. And just like in the 1980s when greed was good and we had that sort of that shift to this weird libertarianism where your ideal, your dream was to just be a star. You were the star of the show. And now here we are, all of us, our own little narcissists running around. And what happens when you instill a culture of dominance?
Mm-hmm.
Dominating becomes the keystone, right? It becomes your North Star.
Right.
And, I've got kids. And if the measure of your success is how fully and completely you can dominate your peers,
Mm.
we are screwed.
Right. Right. And, I feel again that, and this is something you and I have talked about before. I mean, as far as like dictators go or wannabe dictators, I really feel like Trump is a weak one. I mean, we
Yes.
still have we still have some guardrails, I mean, we still do have a constitution, we still do have the right to protest. We have polls that indicate that nothing he's doing is popular, absolutely nothing, even on issues that he used to dominate on, like immigration or the economy. I mean, people do not like what he's doing, and yet we're seeing that so many institutions, of course, that are driven by, the profit motive, or West Point,
Right.
making sure that their alumni are happy and that, they're that they are appeasing, high profile folks. But, they keep sending the message that Trump is omnipotent and must be appeased. I mean, like, you're talking about culture, and this really is a cultural issue. And I think that is really what animates the MAGA movement, because what they want is to be the dominant force in culture.
Yeah.
I mean, they're open now about saying, like, we don't want to see diversity in commercials. We don't want this shoved down our throats. We want to go back to a time where, Steve Bannon was like the epitome of masculinity, which I don't
Oh,
think he was. You know,
gross. Yeah.
right? But like all that, like you watch these commercials, and it's like, I think for Dodge Ram, it's like, we're
Yeah.
Americans and grr, and all this stuff, and it's like, I don't really see that out there organically. This is something that is being
Yes.
manufactured. And when you have the US Open saying we can't show Trump being booed, which, by the way, any political figure who goes to a sporting event is going to be booed. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what party you are. It doesn't matter if you're the president or you're the mayor. Sports fans really just don't like seeing politicians. They're there to have a good time and to watch the game. And people get booed. But now we can't have that. We can't have that shown. But to your point about, where we're at in culture, that can't stop, thousands of people in the audience who all have their phones recording. And so we can see with our very eyes that Trump, is being booed, as all politicians are.
Yeah. For everyone who's watching this right now, send in, if you find some memes or videos of that, send it, and we'll we'll link it into the post after this. I think, yeah, all of that. I think just simply being afraid of any kind of scrutiny is a terrible, terrible weakness. Right. But the bigger problem is our whole system is set up to avoid violence. And I know I'm oversimplifying, right? But like organized political system is meant to ensure that we don't have to just fight every time that somebody wants to take power. And not just that, we don't have to have a coup every 4 years, but not just that we can have robust debate without deciding to shoot each other. And my fear is that they don't want that system.
No.
And I think it's maybe we can transition to the JD Vance stuff and the Venezuela stuff. But we have this over the weekend. Coercion now is the rule. And so you mentioned how unpopular these guys are and how unpopular their policies are, but they're trying to make it so that it doesn't matter how unpopular it is, because they have guns and they have helicopters and they want to push people from Chicago out of helicopters. They want to be able to exert lethal force everywhere. I mean, the Department of War, what are you doing?
I remember how Trump was the peace candidate. I never started any wars, and now we're going to the Department of War. I mean, just the cognitive dissonance is incredible. But I mean, to your point on JD Vance celebrating what I mean, by any account, was a war crime. It was an attack on a boat in Venezuela that killed 11 people. They claimed it was gangs, but that's summary execution. That's not how things are supposed to work. I mean, we're going backwards. I mean, really into like more of a medieval view on war and security, which is, fire first, ask questions later, forget the Geneva Convention, forget all of these conventions of war. If you have, the power, you can do it, which, let's face it, that is the ethos of Putin in Ukraine. That's the ethos of Netanyahu in Gaza. And these are Trump's friends.
Yeah. Ta-Nehisi Coates has spoken about Gaza a lot. And but I think it applies to so many different things. And he makes this sort of broad statement about it as well. He's like, look, I'm not for genocide. And I don't care what a side did. I don't believe that genocide is the answer to that. And it's the same thing with getting rid of due process.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't believe in executing people without giving them a day in court. I think it's, and we can talk about all the reasons why people deserve a day in court. But one thing that I think people overlook is the fact that if you execute someone without giving them a day in court, whether they're guilty or not, questions will remain. It weakens your hold on power, and it makes you look like it makes you look weak. Do your diligence, doing your diligence, and then if you need to, execute them. I'm personally against the death penalty in the same way, that I would be against genocide. I don't care what you do. I'm against it. And it doesn't make sense to me. But I think bombing a ship without, we're supposed to, oh my God, there's so much, Susan. There's so much.
I know. We're just supposed to take their word for it. Of course, these are bad guys, so it's fine. Right.
And that's it. But however, you go back again, without due process, they lose credibility. So the more they do this, the less you trust them. Right. And so all of this is just war crime material.
Right. And then you have JD Vance saying, I don't give a shit. We've got the right to do whatever we want. I don't care if you call it a war crime. And again, this is JD Vance trying to assert his dominance. I mean, it's an open secret that Trump clearly does not seem to be doing great health-wise. He
Right.
disappeared for days on end, the week before last. You can see the swelling in his ankles. You can see the bruising on his hands. Something's going on.
Yeah.
Transparency obviously has never been anything that the Trump administration has been, concerned with. So we don't know. But we've definitely seen JD Vance try and take a much more public role. I mean, I think it was Rick Wilson who kind of described him as like looming over Trump in every press conference, just kind of going wahaha as soon as
Yeah.
we're online. And, so because he does not have the loyalty and the fan base that Trump has, he thinks that by, having this masculine bravado, I don't
Right.
care, I'm going to do war crimes, that people are like, oh, cool, sure, we'll just go along with you if something happens to Trump. I personally don't think that's the case, but I think that's a clear dynamic that's going on here.
So I want to ask you this question, and I would love to hear from the audience too, in the chat. I'm kind of like peeking at the chat as we go. I've been thinking about what happens when JD Vance becomes president. Let's say it's going to happen. Trump, like you said, looks like somehow worse than he's looked, and he's looked bad in the past.
It does not sound good either.
He doesn't sound great. So, we've all hopefully been thinking about a JD Vance presidency, how we form an opposition to that. And there was maybe a naive part of me and perhaps you guys in the audience, and I don't know about you, Susan, maybe not, but that thought, well, maybe JD Vance will, seize this opportunity to return to some norms. But he's signaling now that that's not the case. Do you think how do you think that's going to go over with not only the MAGA base, but with, like, he's saying, we've destroyed democracy and I'm going to continue this legacy.
Right. Well, as weak as I think Trump is right now, which is, why he is chest beating about invading Chicago. I mean, I think he's been talking about this for weeks. Why doesn't he do it? I
Right.
mean, clearly, I think he knows he's going to get a fight there because as a native Chicagoan, as I've said, I think that's the wrong city to mess with. But
Yeah.
I think as weak as Trump is right now, JD Vance is infinitely weaker. I mean, clearly, he is there to do the bidding of Peter Thiel, who financed his Senate campaign,
Yeah.
got him across the finish line. He was not in the strongest position there in the primary. There's also Curtis Yarvin, who is an open fascist, and he's just the toast of the town with the tech bros, and says, your tech leaders should be your god emperors, and you should thank us for this. And JD Vance clearly sees himself as the person to make that a reality, but he has none of the charisma or the personal fan base that Trump has, and I don't think that MAGA fully trusts him either. Fine, Trump picked him. He is, a great ass kisser, but everybody's seen all the clips about him calling Trump America's Hitler back in 2016, about how he has been, hurting people that he cares about, immigrants, trans people. I mean, this is an opportunist, and he's also only 40 years old, with not much of a record. So I think that, we're going to descend into some factionalism on the right, because you're going to have a lot of people who are, going to be claiming to be Trump's heir. Everybody will be, and so is it going to be a fight between, an Alex Jones faction versus the Oath Keepers, versus, the tech bros, what's Elon going to do? I think it's going to be a mess. And, while that there is an opportunity for the opposition, that's also a really dangerous point, as we've seen in history. If you see, the huge power struggles in China and in Russia and authoritarian countries, that's when a lot of atrocities tend to happen.
Well, Lynn in the chat says JD is the plan. Russia calls Trump the transitional president, transitioning to authoritarian state, and she thinks JD will be installed after the midterms. And I think the signaling of violence and a sort of doubling down on fascism is really dangerous, because I agree with you. I think the one thing that, this is going to sound weird, but I think the one thing that makes Trump safe-ish, he's not safe by any means, he's terribly destructive and terribly dangerous, is one, his idiocy. He doesn't cross his T's and dot his I's, but two, he's got widespread support from his base, and it's fixed. And so he doesn't have to do all that much stuff to maintain that support. You know what I mean? And JD Vance doesn't have that kind of support.
Right.
So he's going to have to go big.
Yeah.
And in any kind of power vacuum, they're already making it so that it's almost like they're just disregarding elections altogether at this point, right? This is all public opinion now, and power, and who can control ICE and the police force that they've built. It could be really dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we talk a little bit more about what you can look forward to on Lincoln Square this week, I do want to highlight something that a little ray of hope out there. I thought it was really interesting last week that you had California, Oregon, and Washington, and then shortly afterwards, Hawaii. They have formed what they're calling this West Coast Health Alliance to oppose the idiocy and the utter how to best describe what RFK Jr. is doing at the Department of Health and Human Services. I mean, he's just taken a wrecking ball to scientific research and public health.
Yeah.
And so they're banding together to make sure that, scientific research lives, it has a place to flourish, you can get your vaccines, where you want. And I mean, honestly, while this is positive, especially if you happen to live in those states, all of us are fortunate enough to, it does indicate, this larger rift that's going on in this country. I mean, we are really starting to see regional factionalism come to the forefront. It's been, this has been an issue, I think, that's been growing since the Obama era.
Yep.
But now it's like breaking out into the open, where your life is radically different depending on where you live, based on what rights you have. If you live in a blue state, you have certain rights that you do not have in red states. You have access to health care that you may not, and civil rights that you may not in red states. And I'm not sure how long this is sustainable.
I think, Heather Cox Richardson writes a lot about the Civil War, obviously, and this whole states' rights bullshit, which has been, the sort of stand-in for basically saying, hey, I'm a super racist, we should have states' rights. It was, this, and I'm oversimplifying again, that's my magic, that's my special superpowers. But the idea was, claim everything as states' rights, that each state has its own right to do whatever it wants to do, but then consolidate power at the top. So once you've broken through, then force your will on all of the states. And
Exactly.
I think that is my concern with this states' rights stuff, because we've all noticed it, right? I live in New York, you're in Michigan.
Right.
I have some family in California. We're all like, whew. But that's a short-term win. I think that, as Trygve Olsen always says, you have to play the game that you're in. And I love this coalition, the West Coast coalition. I really want one on the East Coast. I think, the states that embrace science and data and aren't afraid, to try things ought to band together. But I think we need to band together not just for the short term, but for a bigger project, which is to face the fact that our country is moving into regionalism. And do we want a strong and powerful and healthy, happy region? Then we need to put in a bulwark against the flipping of federalist cues.
Yeah.
This is not going to be states' rights forever, because
No.
they don't actually want states' rights.
No.
They want to control everything all the time. And if we're just working for short-term wins, it's not going to work. We really have to see the field.
Yeah. I think, I think abortion is a really good example of, what the long game is. And last month, I talked with Erin Carmone, a longtime journalist who has a new book coming out on women's personal experiences with pregnancy in this post-Dobbs era. And we talked about the fact that
such a good interview, by the way. It was
thank
so
you.
good. I love it.
Yeah, she's amazing.
So
And her I think her book is coming out in November, and everybody should get it. But we were talking about how Trump was really successful with his messaging in the 2024 election after Dobbs, kind of learning the lessons of that midterm 2022 wipeout that Republicans experienced because of the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, where he said, hey, it's states' rights. If you, live in a state that, wants to make abortion legal, that's great. Some states don't want to, but just vote for me because abortion really has nothing to do with what I'm doing. That's a states' rights issue. Meanwhile, we all know that there are many things that can happen at the federal level, and they've been very quiet about it. But I mean, if you look at RFK Jr.'s statements, he is taking shots at the safety of birth control, not just the abortion pill, birth control. And they have enormous power at the federal level. They can invoke the Comstock Act, which, Jessica Valenti and I talked about last week.
Yeah.
Feminist journalist. She writes the Abortion Everyday Substack. And, all the federal government has to do is invoke that, 1800s law that says you can't ship abortion pills. And all of a sudden, it doesn't matter if you live in a state where abortion is legal or not. That probably cuts access in half instantly. And there's many more things that they can do. I mean, if you look at Project 2025, it's all over there. There is a national agenda, for writ large. And so, in the meantime, while everyone kind of had this false sense of security, I live in a blue state. And so I might be okay under Trump. It's like, for how long?
Right. Susan, you're a little frozen, I think. I'm not sure if everyone sees this, but I wanted to say, Casey Jones.
Whoops.
There you are. There you go. But I could hear you. I'm not sure if the audience could, but I can hear you.
Anyway.
Casey Jones in the chat says, I've never been more relieved to be in California, and it's all still terrifying. And I think that's exactly right. It's and you mentioned, Susan, that they're being quiet at the federal level, but they're not being that quiet. I mean, they published the plan, in a book. Everyone can read it. We know what the plan actually is, and I think that's even more reason. Democrats polling has come out. The Democratic Party is less popular than Trump.
Yeah.
And it's because everyone watching this show knows what's at stake. They know what the Republicans are doing. They know what the short, medium, and long-term plan is for MAGA, and they're coming for us. And the Democrats are like, well, let's see what happens in 26.
Yeah.
This stuff's unpopular. We're probably going to win. I don't know. You're not playing the game that we're in, as again, Trygve Olsen says.
Yeah. And, Stuart Stevens last week wrote a great piece that was also, published on Zeteo, and, talked about that on the Left Hook podcast as well. Democrats can't be treating this next election like it's politics as usual. It's an election as usual. I mean, you're not just the opposition party. You are the bulwark against full-on autocracy. And it's a national emergency. And I see it in our comments, on Lincoln Square and from our readers. All of you get it. So, and it's just frustrating to see that there are still a lot of Democratic leaders who don't get it. And so, we have to be the annoying voices out there, making sure that they hear us and they listen to us, because this is our shot. And if we miss, it's going to be really hard to come back from.
It really will be. I want to, I always want to talk about concrete steps. What are we doing? If the Democrats are feckless, for the most part, what can we do here other than, watch Lincoln Square programming and talk through all of this? And by the way, as a side note, one thing that is kind of remarkable is we're all watching history unfold. And so I think that taking part in Substack, whether it's, Lincoln Square or other platforms, reading Heather Cox Richardson, is so compelling. But we do need to take steps. And I would love to hear either in the chat on this show or in the comments that after, when we post the show after, or in the Lincoln Square chat itself, how you all watching this, what are you doing? Are you running for office? Are you donating to candidates? How do you choose candidates to donate to? Understanding where we are with the party. Are you door knocking? A neighbor of mine has been wildly active, and she still every week opens her house for postcards, for phone calls to Congress people. And, slowly you see more and more people show up to our house every week. It's really heartening. So I'd love to hear from the audience what steps you're taking, and maybe next week we should feature some of those steps.
Absolutely. Yeah. And please let us know what else you would like to see on Lincoln Square, what else you'd like to see us talk about, or articles you'd like to see, because, you are our community and we want to make sure that, you feel like you have a resource in us, because we're all in this together.
Absolutely. So should we talk about what's coming up this week?
Let's do it.
Load this little baby. Yeah. So look, this is you can find this on Lincoln Square on Substack for the scheduled shows for the week. Right. Susan, your conversations on Tuesday with Edwin are always so fun.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that Edwin has joined us for his own show. It's The Democracy Stupid, which is at noon Eastern on Thursdays. Edwin is a longtime Chicago radio host. He is the former CEO of the Chicago Sun-Times, former Chicago alderman. He's been in HUD and been a public school teacher. I mean, he's pretty much done it all. And so there's really not much that, we can talk about that he doesn't have some firsthand experience with. So yeah, please, check out our conversations on Tuesday and his show on Thursday. And for our calendar, I just wanted to make a note. We try and update it as much as we can with breaking news. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes Stuart Stevens comes at you with a live that you may not have a lot of notice for, but I know we all enjoy those conversations, and so we want to get Stuart up whenever he has something that he wants to say. But we do have our calendar that we try and keep you alerted on, as well as if you look on social media and on the notes part of Substack, we try and alert you with any last minute or regular features that we've got too.
Yeah, Stuart's a force of nature. He when I see his name on my caller ID, I'm like, oh, we're going live. Here's what's gonna happen.
And it's usually on Friday.
yeah, usually end of the week. I'm wrapping my week up, and here comes Stuart. and I am here for it. I will never say no to that guy. Those are always great. Yeah, and like Susan said, I think there are already maybe a couple of updates to this calendar, but we'll add as everything becomes more official. Yeah, it's going to be a good week for content, and we're covering everything. I hope there's more good news this week.
I hope so too. We're due for some.
We really are. I wonder what that good news would look like.
Maybe everybody could actually get their COVID vaccine, because I'm seeing nightmare stories all over social media.
Yeah, even in our own team.
Yeah.
There are some, there's COVID's going around. Be safe, everyone.
Absolutely. It's that time of year.
It is. All right. Well, 35 minutes flew by, Susan.
It did. There's always so much to talk about.
I know.
And we'll look forward to seeing your comments on what else we should be covering next week. And thanks so much for being here, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Susan.